So the misconception is that cortisol is bad. It's not. It's essential for you to get fitter. And you got to redline your cortisol every once in a while to get beyond those limits so that you can actually make fitness gains. Where people make the mistake is, yes, if that endocrine system is constantly turned on and it never shuts off, that can lead to a lot of health problems. That can lead to the retention of belly fat. Where people need to pay more attention is on the back end of that workout, where you just redlined your fight or flight system, is the recovery.
Welcome everyone to Modern Menopause, a podcast by Parlor Games. I'm one of your co-hosts, Morven, a licensed professional counselor and one of the team members here at Parlor Games. I'm with my co-host, Dr. Robyn, and today we have another very special guest, Dr. Carla DiGirolamo. She is an endocrinologist, an OBGYN, and a specialist in all things women's health, especially when it comes to performance. So today we're going to be asking her a few questions about her specialty, particularly as it pertains to women in menopause. So hi to both of you. Hi, Dr. Robyn. Hi, Dr. Carla.
Hello.
Hey,
thanks so much for having me.
Yes, we're very, very excited because Dr. Robyn and I think we talk a lot about lifestyle stuff, about, fitness. We get a lot of questions, I think, about weight, which comes up a lot, I think, for women in perimenopause and menopause, right, Dr. Robyn?
Yeah, lots. Probably the biggest topic we get asked, I think, or at least close second. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Carla, before we get started, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a Board Certified Reproductive Endocrinologist, which means my training was in obstetrics and gynecology. I did a residence in OBGYN, and I then went on to do a fellowship in reproductive endocrinology and fertility. So I am a female reproductive hormone expert. I spent about 18 years in the IVF industry. I was a partner at a very large fertility practice in the Boston area, Massachusetts, and in December of 2024, I retired from that practice and went out on my own because I finally had the opportunity to bring two of my life's passions together, and that is female sport and athletics and reproductive endocrinology. So I am absolutely thrilled to be doing what I'm doing. I'm living the dream, and it's a very nice niche to be able to have expertise as a fitness professional and a women's health specialist specializing in hormone health. So it's great. I didn't realize the need for it until I started doing it a few years ago, and it just kind of exploded, which kind of catalyzed my decision to leave the fertility world and go out and pursue this full time.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Very
that's amazing.
cool.
I don't think there's a lot of specialists of your type out there. Certainly there's, docs working in fertility, but it's wonderful that you can offer this to women.
We were looking at your website, right? Because you mentioned right now as well that sports and fitness is a passion of yours, right? And so it's something that you've also sort of seen women, I'm guessing, struggle with, or I'm guessing, you mentioned on your website women, the normalization of women missing periods when they become sort of higher level athletes and whatnot. Obviously, a lot of our customers, a lot of our clients are older women going into perimenopause, menopause. I'm curious about, do you see a lot of women in this phase of life who are sort of struggling with their health and wellness, with their hormones changing, with it impacting not necessarily athletic performance in sort of elite level, but even just their ability to train, to do sports, to do the things that they want to do, right? To kind of achieve those goals of, hey, I want to run a marathon, I want to run a half marathon, I want to start weightlifting, that kind of thing.
Yes, it's the majority of my practice. I would probably say 2/3 to 3/4 of my practice are high-performing women who are over 40. And by high performing, they could be athletes, they could be CEOs. I have had fighter pilots, I've had fighters, I've had really quite a range of high performing women in my practice. And whether you're a CEO of a company or a triathlete, the headspace for pursuing greatness in whatever you do is very, very similar. Of course, athletes have the physical demands of their sport, which is a little bit different from what a CEO might have in terms of cognitive and mental demands for her career. But there are a lot of parallels to high performers no matter what they do. I would say the majority of people I see are athletes, with probably 20% being high performing professions that are non-athletic professions.
I'm curious, I think there's so much talk on social media about like what to do, what not to do. This type of training is bad for women. This is going to make you gain weight. This is, so much. Women are being inundated by so much in these years after 40, perimenopause and menopause. And I was hoping we could speak a little bit about that and like what's actually true, what isn't. How do we change our movements, our exercise as we age?
So I think one of the challenges is that women are very, very different as individuals. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems that led us to the place where we're at, which is this information abyss and really not quite sure what to do, is because doctors, influencers, researchers try to paint women with one broad brushstroke, when in fact we are very different as individuals. What the power lifter needs is different from what the triathlete needs, is different from what the CEO needs. And individualization of care is really what is so needed at this time of life, because every woman's experience of perimenopause and menopause is different, and every woman's experience of life is different. Is she dealing with young children? Is she dealing with a high-powered career? Is she a pro triathlete? And you can't just paint women with one broad brushstroke. I mean, part of the issue with losing periods during menstruation is because back in the day, all of the research was on men, and so we just applied what we knew about men to women. And that didn't work out so well. We have women losing periods and getting stress fractures and, peaking in their performance in their early 20s, and then they're done. So I think that's like the biggest issue we see, is that we can't paint everybody with one broad brushstroke. But I think one of the things that is a common denominator is the importance of muscle and bone health, because it is really the foundation of performance, longevity, vitality, is focusing on muscle and bone health, because metabolic health follows from that. And a lot of things follow from that foundation of muscle and bone health. So if there is a broad brush stroke to paint, that is probably the big one, because it just underlies so many other things.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think women, I know in my own practice, so many times people come to me and say, I saw this on the internet, and it said, HIIT training is bad, and there's so much of that broad brushstroke, like you're saying. But it's mostly, I think a lot of it is people trying to sell women stuff, right? Versus,
Without
just,
question.
yeah, absolutely. So the individuality part is so important. Yeah, I love that approach. When we're thinking about muscle and bone health, of course, we think about strength training and protein. I want to pop on the protein train for just a minute, because I think that's the other thing we're seeing so much of. And there's been such a shift in trying to get people to eat more protein. And so I'm wondering, in your practice, do you see that women are under consuming, and what, maybe not, an absolute recommendation, because like you mentioned, everybody's going to be different, but I think women are confused on how much they're trying to eat, and some people, it becomes a full-time job. So what do you tell women? Yeah.
It's an interesting dynamic that I'm seeing. I think women are very knowledgeable about protein, and many of them are very focused on the protein, and they're getting a reasonable amount of protein. I think some of the recommendations that are out in the sports and fitness world are higher than what the US RDA recommendations are, because women are much more athletic, they're much more active. We have so many more women in competitive and elite sport now than we ever have. And those recommendations by the US RDA for the general population just do not cut it for women, in this stage of life, which is a very catabolic time, when our hormones change and go into the menopausal phase, we can lose up to 20% of our bone density within the first 5 years, and muscle mass, strength, and power also begins to decline. So it's a very catabolic time. And then if you have women who are active or even elite competitors in sport, they're going to need even more protein. But I think women, are focused on this. They know they need the protein. Whether or not they're actually able to get it is a different question. A lot of the women who are vegan have a huge struggle with getting enough protein because of their limitations. But what I'm seeing more of is women under consuming carbohydrates. And I think there's a couple of reasons. One is that if women who are now in midlife grew up in the 80s and 90s when everybody was carb phobic, and when we didn't know about as much as we know now about the necessity of carbohydrates. We didn't know back then how carbohydrate insufficiency impacts low energy availability and red S. We do now, and it makes sense because carbohydrates are the preferred fuel source of the body. If the body doesn't get enough carbohydrates, it starts breaking down protein for that fuel. And so it's almost like you're defeating the purpose. You're trying to build all this muscle and you're taking in all this protein. Well, if you're not getting enough carbs, you're breaking down some of that to turn into fuel. So the pattern that I'm seeing emerge is the underconsumption of carbohydrates relative to protein.
Sure.
I love that. I love that because I love carbs. I just feel so seen. I'm like, cool, I can carry on eating my loaf of sourdough every day. So, but actually, I think that you mentioned something really interesting there, Dr. Carla, which is, carb phobia, right? Is women growing up in this time period where it was like this, and I think the message was even more like, this will make you fat, right? Mm-hmm. And we hear from so many women, Dr. Robyn and I, almost every time of, hey, I'm getting this belly. I'm getting this pooch. It's common in menopause, menobelly. Obviously, the women that we speak to, I'm sure some of them are elite athletes. I'm sure some of them are high-performing women. But a lot of them are just sort of, women who are going to the gym regularly, and they're starting to see their workouts just not work as effectively. They're starting to say, hey, I'm eating the same thing, but somehow I'm gaining weight. And some of these women really are. They're like, I ate my oatmeal for breakfast, my salad for lunch, my chicken for dinner, but suddenly I'm gained 5 pounds. I'm still doing my CrossFit, I'm still doing my whatever. It's not working. What's sort of happening for these women? Because obviously they get very frustrated, and then they'll start doing quite extreme things. They'll be like, I'm going to fast, I'm going to cut out all carbs, I'm going to, I'm going to try and exercise twice as much, and they can't. They're feeling fatigued, right? They've got all these other menopause symptoms going on. So what's kind of happening for these women?
I think it's a similar thing, but on a less dramatic scale. Your competitive athletes are obviously going to need to fuel more because they are competitive athletes. They're doing more. But low energy availability in red S is not just an athlete problem. We are finding that in avid recreational athletic women, these are women who go to the gym regularly. If you do CrossFit 3 or 4 times a week, that's no joke. And sometimes these women are going out and they're, running 5-10 miles on the other days. They're not competitive athletes. They are not elite athletes, but they are recreational athletic people who are still doing a lot of intense things that require a lot of fuel. So I think the same holds true for them. And I have some great sports RDs that I work with, and I send pretty much all of my athletic women to the sports RD just to get a finger on the pulse of what they're actually consuming relative to what they're expending. Because even not Gen Pop, because Gen Pop we know doesn't really exercise regularly. If you're exercising regularly, you're in a different category. But if you're exercising regularly, you may not be fueling appropriately. You may not be getting enough protein and carbs. So many people that I see say, oh, I eat really great, I don't think it's a problem. And then they go see the sports RD and they say, oh my God, I didn't realize that I was under fueling. I was getting 1,500 calories a day. And most of the time, for a woman who's training 4 or 5 days a week, that's not enough. But we just have these conceptions of, the 1,200 calorie a day is really where everybody should be. barely even makes the mark for just your basic physiologic needs, let alone put on any kind of performance on top of that. So I think the same holds true, but just on a different scale, even for the recreational, active, athletic woman.
Yeah, I agree with what I see in my practice. I would say that picture definitely holds true. But I think that's hard for a lot of women to hear, and it's hard for them to shift their mindset around that. Is there anything that maybe you don't see it as much in your population of avid athletes, but I'm wondering how do we help women understand that and not kind of close their ears and eyes and be like, well, I heard what you said, but I'm not necessarily going to do it. It's scary.
I send my recreational active women to the sports RD.
Yeah,
I do.
And
because the other scary trend that I'm finding is that there are a lot of registered dietitians who don't work with active or athletic people. And this doesn't have to be people who are competitive. These are just, like you mentioned, the people who go to the gym regularly. A lot of RDs are not seeing it as a problem when women lose their periods. They don't have an understanding of what active women need, because most of our data that we know about is in the general population. And what we are seeing now, I just recently gave a lecture about this about a year ago. What we're seeing now is an enormous number of women who are going to the gym regularly and who are even competing at the elite level. And the reason for this is Title IX. Title IX which gave women their own space, females their own space for sport and athletics, was passed in 1972. So in the 1970s, this is when you saw this huge influx of women come into sports and athletics. Well, that was in 1972. Those women are now in their 50s and 60s, and they're still going strong. They've been athletes, they've been recreationally active their entire lives, and they don't want to stop. And I don't think the medical community knows what to do with this, because we're seeing an unprecedented number of athletic women in the population, and mainstream medicine doesn't know how to deal with this. They don't know what low energy availability is. They don't know what RED-S is. They don't know what HRV is. They don't know what any of these things are. And it's creating this huge problem for this population of women who are very, very physically active.
Oh, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
To tell us, Dr. Carla, because I think that one of the things that we talk with our ladies a lot about is sort of how can they live their best lives, right? In perimenopause, menopause, right? Kind of like what you're saying. These are women who, they are healthy, they are wanting to go out, they are wanting to do the hobbies. You mentioned sort of under fueling, under carbing. Are there any other mistakes that you see women making in sort of perimenopause and menopause when it comes to health and fitness, hormone health, where you're sort of seeing a lot of women saying, hey, let's change track here, because this isn't going to help you moving forwards?
I think a big mistake and misconception out there is that women in this age group need to avoid intensity, because there is this perception around cortisol that it's a bad thing and we can't do anything to spike our cortisol or else we'll get the belly fat, when it's only partially true and it's kind of out of context. So cortisol, do you mind if I jump into the cortisol conversation at this
please.
point? Yeah.
I was going to say, Dr. Robyn and I are like, this is all the time, all the time. Hit us with it.
Cortisol is just one tiny hormone in an entire complex endocrine pathway called the sympathetic nervous system, or the fight or flight response. This is the endocrine system that allows you to respond to a physical challenge. It could be a threat. It was initially designed to combat the bear in the woods that's ready to eat you, but in more civilized societies, this could be stressful life circumstance, this could be an athletic event, it could just be a regular workout that you're doing on a day. To meet a physical challenge, that endocrine system needs to turn on. And when we're in a time of our life when our muscle strength, mass, and power, and our bone density are all declining, we need to work that much harder to be fit and to go beyond our limits to maintain and build the muscle and bones. The only way you can move beyond your limits physically is by the activation of that endocrine pathway that's going to allow you to meet that challenge. So you need cortisol. It is your friend. That whole endocrine pathway is what's going to help you do the things you need to do to build muscle, to build bone, to stay fit, and for longevity. Where people make the mistake is, yes, if that endocrine system is constantly turned on and it never shuts off, that can lead to a lot of health problems. That can lead to the retention of belly fat. Where people need to pay more attention is on the back end of that workout, where you just redlined your fight or flight system, is the recovery. The recovery involves sleep. It involves fueling. It involves more attention to foam rolling and tissue care and mobility work and things like that. And as busy midlife people, those things oftentimes get neglected because of time constraints or whatever else. But it is tremendously important to bring that system back down to earth so that you can recover properly and then be ready for the next challenge, your next workout on the next day or whatever. So the misconception is that cortisol is bad. It's not. It's essential for you to get fitter, and you got to redline your cortisol every once in a while to get beyond those limits so that you can actually make fitness gains. But where the opportunity is for improving your performance is really in bringing that system back down to earth. So we shouldn't be avoiding intensity. Now, we shouldn't be doing it every day, because then that endocrine system will never turn off. You need your lower intensity days to kind of help the system recover, but you can't avoid it entirely, or else you just won't make those fitness gains that are going to keep you, doing the things you want to do into your 8th, 9th decades.
I love it. I think that's a big myth that a lot of women get. One of the things, again, inundated on social media a lot of times, is the cortisol detox. And so we talk a lot about, no, we need it. And I love putting it in this context. There's another kind of potential myth that women get premenopausally. I was kind of I was looking at you on Instagram, and I saw you dispelling this a little bit. So I was hoping we could talk about it so the listeners can hear it too. But this idea about there's a specific type of workout, or how we have to change our workouts for where we are in our menstrual cycle when we are still menstruating. And I was peeking, on your Instagram, and you gave it a little bit more individuality, which is kind of the theme today, I think. And so I thought we could talk about that a little bit. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so now we're kind of moving a little bit back from midlife. In perimenopause and menopause, our cycles are not regular. In menopause, we don't have them anymore. But now we're talking about in reproductive age when we are having cycles. And, this has been a controversial topic for a while now. The initial sentiments were that, okay, the hormones are doing this during each of the phases of the menstrual cycle. Hormones have a certain impact on physiology, so therefore we need to train for what is happening in your physiology in relation to that hormone, to those hormones in those phases. When those studies were happening on a population basis, they were not showing that there was any appreciable benefit for performance when women trained this way. But when you ask women, do your periods impact, or your period cycle impact your performance, 80% of them will tell you yes. So that is like the big discrepancy. It's like, well, we're not seeing it in the data, but women are telling us that this really matters. And so one thought is that women's menstrual cycles are so variable, even within the same woman. The same woman doesn't have the exact same menstrual cycle every month. 1 month it might be 28 days, the next month it might be 30. She might even skip a cycle. You can skip a cycle a year and still be considered in the normal range. And then if within one person you have all this variation, think about, it's amplified when you study a population. And when you have that much variation, it's very hard to see statistically significant differences. So people kind of threw up their hands and said, not quite sure what to do about this. But then as more studies were happening, what has now evolved in the thinking is that it's not as much what hormone A is doing to muscle and bone and physiology and what hormone B is doing in this part of the cycle. It's what is the athlete experiencing in her own menstrual cycle. What are her symptoms? Because you probably remember when you had periods yourselves, your best friend might have the most horrible PMS. She'd be out of school or out of work for the first 2 days of her period, but you might be fine. Never had PMS before. Yeah, I got a few cramps, take some ibuprofen, no problem. You both have the same menstrual cycle, but one person's experience of that menstrual cycle is completely different from somebody else's. And so what has evolved from that is that what is less important is not what the hormone levels are and what the hormones are doing, it's how is she experiencing her menstrual cycle through the phases. So rather than tracking to specific hormones, you track to her symptoms. What are her symptoms doing during each phase of the menstrual cycle? And that gives us a more realistic and individualized way to help women train more effectively that is based on their individual experience of their own menstrual cycle, because it is vastly different woman to woman.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. Well, let's hit on another, pretty common myth, right? Which is, well, I wouldn't say it's a myth, just a big conversation right now, which is, and again, comes up a lot for us, which is testosterone. Yes. Testosterone is the cure-all. Take it, you're going to have a ton of energy, you're going to have a ton of muscle, you're going to have a libido is the big one that often comes up for women who are, hey, I took testosterone and everything's fixed, problem solved, don't have any, menopause issues. What's your sort of take on that, Dr. Carla?
Well, I think the data is very strong for libido in menopausal women. Some of the earliest and most, consistent data that we've seen so far is for hypoactive sexual desire disorder, which is just a fancy way of saying low libido that is creating an issue that is impacting quality of life. And what we know is that when testosterone is dosed to target levels in the female physiologic range, and I stress that because the male physiologic range is 10 times that of the female physiologic range. So when we target the female physiologic range for women who have issues with libido and menopause, there is great data for safety and efficacy of testosterone to bring relief of those symptoms and to make an impact. So it's unfortunate that we don't have FDA-approved products that we can safely give women. I use a very reliable compounding pharmacy whose products I have a lot of confidence in when I prescribe it to women, but that's where the data is. Then it's like, well, what about just regular drive? A lot of women don't feel very motivated and they're just not feeling it when it comes to working out. They've lost their mojo. Can testosterone help there? That hasn't been so well studied, but if she's experiencing that, if we've already optimized her treatment of hot flashes, if she's sleeping fine, if hot flashes are fine, if her relationship is fine, and she's not dealing with clinical depression or anxiety, sometimes testosterone can help that too. And I've had mixed results when I prescribe it to people for that indication. Now, in those female physiologic ranges, though, when we start talking about body composition and muscle mass, there is a really good study out there that actually does a dose-response curve of muscle mass and strength against what the dose and testosterone levels are in women. And unfortunately, in the female physiologic range of testosterone, you're not going to see dramatic increases in lean muscle mass or in muscle strength. You will only really see those when those testosterone doses are higher, targeting levels of testosterone that are closer to the male range, which is in the 200s and higher. That will help you build muscle mass. It will also help increase lean mass, but it can also have a risk of insulin resistance. When we talk about PMOS, formerly known as PCOS, that's a naturally occurring state where you have too much androgen running around. These women struggle with obesity. They struggle with metabolic syndrome. So when a woman has too much testosterone, it can cause problems too. There can be side effects, there can be hair growth, and we don't know a lot about the long-term safety of dosing testosterone that high. So that's how I counsel women who are asking me about whether testosterone treatment is for them. I do think it does have safety and efficacy for certain indications, but for other things, you really have to be in uncharted territory to see differences.
Right. Well, like you say, kind of going back to your original point, this is where social media has become so dangerous, right? Because we hear from a lot of women who are like, need to get rid of all my cortisol, can't eat a carb, need to take a ton of testosterone. And it's sort of being able to shift women and saying, no, you know, you do, yes, you obviously need a more individualized approach, but these are very sort of broad brushstrokes that aren't always based in reality. That's, I think, something that Dr. Robyn and I talk about. We talk about it more with DHEA, but these really, really high doses that are physiologically male versus female, and sort of women having pretty unpleasant side effects when they're using that stuff. So that's super interesting.
While we're on the broad brushstroke and what everybody needs for perimenopause and menopause, I think supplements, there's a few hot topic supplements out there right now. I don't know if you're using, I would imagine using some supplements in your practice, but is there anything that you see actually, and I realize it's individualized, but anything you're seeing actually help women in this area with performance and, you know, their motivation and energy?
I think creatine is tried and true. It's been probably one of the longest used supplements. It's been the best studied, and it is, you know, we know all about its safety. It's one of the safest ones out there, and it is very effective for helping with muscular performance. And it's even started to make its way into the endurance world, because, you know, historically we would only think about it, you know, for bodybuilders. That's who we would think about using creatine, but there are lots of benefits for creatine in people who are just, you know, actively doing resistance training consistently. And then there was a question, well, what about the endurance athlete that's not doing resistance training, but she's, you know, doing other things consistently? And there, I believe, is some data out there to support performance in endurance athletes as well. There's also a lot of buzz about the cognitive benefits of creatine. There is a researcher named Darren Kandow who I listened to a podcast that he was on, and this was years back, and this is when we were just starting to learn of the cognitive benefits of creatine. So that is probably the number one supplement that I talk to women about. I think the only group that creatine may not be so beneficial for is the general population sedentary individual who is not actively doing physical activity. There's been studies of this too that show that if you're a sedentary person taking creatine, it's not going to hurt you, but you're not going to achieve the benefits that the person doing the strength training is going to gain, because they have a synergistic relationship. But if you're sedentary, it may not benefit you quite as much.
Dr. Carla, you're just out here making my day. I eat a ton of carbs and I already take creatine. I'm like, oh,
fantastic!
I'm doing all the right things for once. Yeah, that's. I think because that's another thing that Dr. Robyn and I definitely hear from a lot is what can women do. I think that, you know, for our women listening, and you know, for anyone listening to our podcast, for our various ladies in perimenopause and menopause, if you're enjoying this episode, be sure to like, to follow, to share. One of the things I think that the women listening would love to know from you, Dr. Carla, is sort of what can they do as a sort of basic first step, right? These are women who, because you mentioned this a wee bit ago, they have lost some of their mojo. And so that's often where we hear from women where they're starting to look into their health. They've maybe been athletes, they've been athletic, they've gained some weight, they've sort of been hit with this snowball of perimenopause, menopause issues, poor sleep, fatigue. They're not sure, they want to get back in, because these are women who they want to hike, they want to garden, they want to play pickleball, they want to go into the gym, but they're just feeling like the tank is empty. Where would you suggest for women like that is a good starting point to sort of making a change, starting to kind of live their best life in this phase of life?
So I think the very, very first thing that I want women who are experiencing that to know is that they're not alone. There are so many women out there struggling just like they are. And there is a Facebook community out there, which is a very reputable one. It's one that I have been a part of for a very long time. It's called Hit Play Not Pause. It's from Feisty Menopause. It's a media company that's based up in Canada. But this Facebook group has about 30,000 individuals. I joined it back in 2020, right around COVID when it had 1,500 members. Celine Yeager is the host. She's a pro cyclist. She's a pro cyclist. She's 57 years old. She's in it just like I am, and she's one of us, all going through it herself as well. And she started this initially for competitive elite athletes, and then it just snowballed into a monstrosity where you've got just active people who go to the gym every day, have joined and love this Facebook group, and it's grown into a community of over 35,000 people. So I would recommend, getting into a social community where people are actively talking about this so that you don't feel so alone. So Hit Play Not Pause, that is a great podcast. Feisty Menopause, that's where that's how you find all the content. There's a membership and everything like that. So that would be step one. Step two, honestly and seriously, I think everybody could use a coach for a short period of time, even if it's just for 6 weeks. Coaches aren't just for competitive athletes. Coaches are for everyday people who want to live their best lives. It could be a life coach, or it could be a sports coach. If you're a marathon runner, maybe your coach is someone who also runs marathons. If you're someone who they're not attached to sport, maybe you find a life coach. Somebody who can help you get on track and to give you another perspective and help you lead your best life. Now for me, I'm a CrossFitter. I'm a CrossFit athlete. That's what I like to do. My coach is a former CrossFit Games athlete. I have been with her for 5, 6, 7 years at least, and she's the best thing that ever happened to me. And I'm not on the competitive circuit. I never have been. I'm a recreational athlete, but it has been a game changer. Just for the headspace piece of it, of how to make, what to make of what is happening to our bodies, which is just so dramatic, and how to keep our head above water and just take some baby steps, so that lots of baby steps together now has you in a really great place. So first, find a social media community that speaks to you. Second, get a coach, and that coach can individualize, recommendations for that person's experience, because that's really what it's all about.
What I love that you said there too was the little by little, step by step. So many women, if they were athletes before and fell out of it or something, and they're kind of stuck in the shoulds, right? I should work out 5 days a week. I should do this, and I should, eat this way. And then all of a sudden there's paralysis, and we can't go from sitting on the couch to 5, 6, 7 days a week. And so, one step. I love finding the community first and getting in that headspace.
Because you need the confidence, knowing other people are experiencing this too, and hearing what other people have done, to help themselves get out of the rut. And you can find some really good ideas listening to other people. And, even if you don't feel comfortable sharing your own experience, you can at least sit back and listen and observe and see what other people are doing. And then you can gain some ideas, gain some confidence yourself. They're like, hey, I'm not alone. People know about this. This is the real deal. And then you can find yourself that person that is going to help take you by the hand to help get you started.
I love that.
Yeah. I think that's such a great piece of advice as well for women, as you mentioned, Dr. Robyn and Dr. Carla, that for a lot of women in this phase of life, they've been busy as well, right? Through their 30s, they're busy. They've got kids, they've got jobs, they've got stuff going on, and stuff doesn't go away with the click of your fingers. It goes away bit by bit. I used to go to the gym 6 days a week, and then it was 5, and then it was 4, and then it was 3, and I used to eat really clean, but then we started eating out. It doesn't go away all at once. It doesn't come back all at once either. Especially if women have fallen out of it. Obviously, for women who maintain it, I think it's a slightly different experience. They tend to experience more of that frustration. Why doesn't stuff work the way it used to?
Yes.
One of the other last things I want to touch on before we run out of time is injury. I know Dr. Robyn has sort of personal experience with this, but I think that's the other thing we hear for women who feel frustrated, especially from our women who are more athletic, who are, doing a lot of physical hobbies, hiking, gardening, pickleball, who are doing a lot of sports, is in this phase of life, injuries become more common. Hormone shift, diets, even if diet isn't shifting, I guess, but hormones particularly tend to shift, and the injuries are more common. Is that something that you deal with as well in your practice?
I deal with it in my practice, and I deal with it personally. I'm dealing with it right now. I have shoulder problems. I don't have any tears, but I've got pain that I'm working through, and mobility stuff that I'm working through. And it is frustrating. For somebody that could do 90 pull-ups in a workout to really be struggling with less than that it's hard. And the things that used to work don't work. So I'm living it, so I get it. So what's happening hormonally is that tendons and ligaments also have estrogen receptors on them, which means that even tendons and ligaments are expecting to see hormonal signal that is no longer there. And when those hormonal signals are no longer as consistent as they were, or in the case of menopause, they're no longer seeing estrogen and progesterone cycling in the way it did, pain perception can be different, and the character of tendons and ligaments changes. And so it's very, very, very common to experience joint pain. The other thing that's happening is that muscle mass, strength, and power is declining. So if we talk about the shoulder, it's surrounded by a complex of muscles called the rotator cuff, layered by the deltoids and the scapularis complex. It's really a complicated place. And that is all changing. The muscles, the tendons, and ligaments are all changing with these hormonal changes. So what that means is that we have to pay more attention to those things that are going to keep us moving well. And that is making sure that our movement patterns are healthy. I kind of had to reconstruct how I did push-ups and make sure, because when you're younger, you can do them any which way and you can get away with it. But when you get older and everything is changing, form needs to be more strict. Sometimes you got to back off and do some easier options, and you have to have patience with yourself. I think the best thing I ever did was find a performance physical therapist. Performance PT is this newly emerging specialty of physical therapy that focuses on active people who want to move well for their whole lives, and it's more preventative. It's also applicable for if someone's recovering from injury, but it's also to help prevent the injuries to begin with. And finding a performance PT was a game changer for me. So focusing more on warm-ups, cool downs, mobility activities such as yoga, physical therapy. I mean, I spend more time doing PT right now than I do doing my actual workouts. But I know that works because I've dealt with shoulder issues before, and I've rehabbed things completely, and I've been back to 100% at certain points in my life. So I think that is really important, is to spend more time on recovery activities. Cold plunges, great. Anything that's going to dial down the inflammation, which is very common in this stage of life because our musculoskeletal system is changing so much. There's a lot of inflammation there, and we have to try to dial that down. And we can do that by being kind to those joints and to, those movement patterns into our bodies, so that we're not just, heading out there into a workout with a 5-minute warm-up and skipping the cool down and doing it again tomorrow. Attention really does need to be paid to these things, and they will help prevent injury. It'll help build the muscles that you can't necessarily see that stabilize things, and it could actually make you perform even better than you did before when you start paying attention to the real basics and the importance of those.
Yeah, I love that.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I think that's about all we have time for, Dr. Carla. That was wonderful to hear all this stuff. I think it's so interesting. And I love that message that women don't have to slow down, right? We might have to change, but we don't have to be telling women, you got to slow down, this part of your life, just sit and knit and sort of, play mahjong. If you want to do that stuff, great, but you can do other stuff too. You can get out on a pickleball court, you can get out and run a marathon, you can go hike that mountain. These things aren't gone. You can.
It's a detour. Yeah. It's a detour, not a decline.
Love it.
And sometimes that path just looks different.
Yeah.
It's not a decline. It's just, okay, the path looks different. I have to do different things to achieve this. And along the way, you might say, I do this even better now than I did before. Like, I'm a better runner now than I ever was when I was 30. because I needed to run on the days I wasn't lifting weights, because I needed to keep myself away from the weights so I didn't injure myself. And then lo and behold, wow, I'm actually a better runner than I thought I would. So it's a detour where opportunities will continue to present themselves. So it's really only the beginning of the magic that you can experience in this time of life.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
What a wonderful message for women. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For our ladies listening, Dr. Carla has a website with a ton of incredible information on it. It is drcarlad.com. I believe that's correct, but correct me if I'm wrong. It's just drcarlad.com. You can read more of information about her. I think you've got some blogs on there. You've got a lot of amazing information for women, and you can obviously kind of, if you want to speak to Dr. Carla herself, I believe you do work with women in quite a few different states. For our ladies listening, if you're curious, check her out. If you enjoyed this episode and you think someone else would benefit from it, if you know ladies who love to be active at every age and every stage, be sure to send it to them. You can find us on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube. We're all over the place. Be sure to like, subscribe, make sure you don't miss another episode. A huge thank you, obviously, to you, Dr. Carla. We really appreciate you being here, sharing all this incredible information with us. We, love to share stuff like this with our ladies who, they've heard so much misinformation. They've not really heard this message before. A lot of the time that, like you said, this is a detour, not a decline. And that's probably a great send-off for women to hear.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to reach your audience and to speak with you about something that I'm just so passionate about.
Awesome. Okay. We will be sure to see you next time. Dr. Robyn and I will be back, either just the two of us or with a special guest. If you want to be featured on an episode, if you have questions that you want to ask Dr. Robyn, there is a link in the bio. You can send it over to us, and we'll be sure to answer it in the next episode. Bye, everyone.